Hey YouTube, it's Ian from Big Rock Media. So you guys have given me a lot of flack in the comments in this past year or two because I switch bikes all the time. So you've seen my reviews of the Africa Twin, the GS, other bikes, and now you've been seeing the reviews on the 790. You saw the 690, you saw the WR250. So anyway, what gives? So what I'm going to do today is tell you a little bit about why I switch bikes as often as I do. And I'm also going to give you a comparison of the last three adventure bikes that I've owned most recently, which was a 2017 Africa Twin CRF 1000L, the 2017.5 R1200GS, and then this 2020 790 Adventure R. So before I get started, I just want to mention and to have you guys keep in mind that motorcycles are largely an emotional purchase and an emotional connection, right? It's not a logical thing, it's not a financial thing, it's not an investment. So your decisions are based on, your passion and your interest. Now, one thing I definitely am guilty of, and my friends will tell you this, is I sort of have this grass is greener mentality. So what I mean by the grass is greener is that I'm always looking at what new is coming out or what else is out there and thinking about, oh, how might that be better than what I have? Now, this is not a healthy thing. You don't want to do this in your life. You don't want to do it about people, about objects, or about vehicles because it's expensive and it's unnecessary. And usually what you find is whatever you switch to may have some good parts and you may be excited for a while, but overall there's going to be downsides as well and you might miss what you had before. But I definitely have the grass is greener disease, and it's just something that I'm trying to manage. Now, sort of compensating for that, and on the other side of that, to me, is that the theory that life is short. Now, I work hard. I've worked hard in my career and my life to get where I am. And you know what? If I want to get a new bike every couple of years, then why shouldn't I? I love experiencing different motorcycles. I love trying different things out. And a lot of my past experiences owning over 30 different motorcycles is really what has allowed me to start something like this YouTube channel, which I would not be able to do if I didn't have that background. So life is short. You're supposed to enjoy it, try different things. If you can afford to do it, I think it's just fine. Now, keep in mind, a lot of the bikes I buy, in fact, most bikes that I bought in my riding career have been used bikes. Now, they might be 6 months used, they might be a year, but still you're not buying a brand new one and you're saving that depreciation. Sometimes they might be older and they might be fully depreciated. So when you say that it's really expensive to keep buying and selling bikes, well, actually it doesn't have to be. Not if you buy at the right price used and then keep it in really good shape and then sell it a year later for almost what you paid. So that's some of the explanation of sort of why I switch bikes a lot. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the last three adventure bikes I've had, so focusing on those. So a few years ago, I had the Honda Africa Twin I bought in 2017. I did buy that new. And then I moved to the R1200GS, and now I've moved to the 790 Adventure R. Now these are just the three most recent bikes. As you can see behind me in my garage wall, I've had a lot of different adventure bikes. I've had the F100GS, I've had V-Stroms, I've had Triumph Tigers, I've had KTM 950 and 990. I've had other stuff that I can't even remember right now. I've had older 1200GSs. So anyway, you get the point. So what did I like about the Africa Twin? So a lot of people, I have one of the most viewed Africa Twin videos on YouTube. I don't know why, because it's not even a good video. And it was the first video I did like on a cell phone, not even planning to start a YouTube channel. But anyway, I digress. The things I liked about the Africa Twin, the build quality was really, really solid. It felt like something that was going to last a long time. With the exception of, the forks have an issue on the early ones with the coating. And there's been some gas tank issues with the later ones. But anyway, if you gloss over that, it was a pretty well-built bike. Honda's reputation for reliability was really good. I felt the bike was a really good value, especially when it came out. It was like, what, 13,000, something like that, maybe 14,000, I forget. For a brand new 1,000cc class adventure bike, that was really good. The engine on the Africa Twin is really smooth and really tractable. It has a very linear spread of power all the way from the low RPM all the way up to the high RPM. It's not really exciting, but it is quick. It'll keep up with most other bikes. It's a good spread of torque and it's very easy to ride on and off road. It doesn't do anything unpredictable. Also, it has probably the least vibration of any bike that I've ever had. I like the plush suspension on the Africa Twin. So on the one side, you could describe it as kind of wallowy and kind of soft, but on the other hand, it's also plush and comfortable. So riding all day through rocks and rough roads, it doesn't beat you up. And that's the opposite of kind of what this bike does. This bike's pretty harsh. Just the all-around ability of the Africa Twin to go from off-road to on-road and everything in between was really, really excellent. Now, the things that were kind of downsides for me in the Africa Twin, I mentioned the issues with the forks. The other things were that just some of the features that it was lacking. Now, they've addressed this with a newer Africa Twin on the 1100. For me, it really was like the cruise control and the quick shifter and the adjustable windshield. Those were kind of some big things that I didn't like. I really wish it had cruise control. I really wish it had a quick shifter, and I wish the windshield you could adjust while you're riding, which is something that the GS has, but of course now I've lost again by going to the 790. The Africa Twin had quite a bit of wind buffeting, but you know what? It's not as bad as this bike is. Also, the Africa Twin didn't really excite you, didn't really get your juices flowing, if that makes sense, whereas like this bike does, at least for me, because of the character of the engine and sort of the lighter weight. So really the reasons I just moved on from the Africa Twin was I had some other bikes and I had some other things going on, and I sold it. I think I had a 690 maybe after that, or at this time, I can't remember. Eventually I ended up buying the R1200GS. So the reason that I bought the 1200GS was mostly because I just hadn't owned the newer GSs. I went and test rode a few of them. I test rode the water-cooled 1200 a couple different years, and then I also rode the 1250GS. And I kind of fell in love with the combination of the features, the luxury, the power, the smoothness, the handling, how it felt so balanced at low speeds. I like kind of the character of the boxer engine and how that was different. I like the shaft drive. It was just really an amazing all-around bike. And to this day, the GS is still one of my favorite all-around motorcycles ever produced. Truly, truly, I wish I could have afforded to keep my GS and the 790, but really I'm trying to be responsible these days with that sort of thing. So I mentioned the major things I loved about the GS. I mean, the power, the handling, the stability, the wind protection, the adjustable windshield, the shaft drive, the features, cruise control, electronic suspension. I mean, the thing is loaded. Also, it handles far better than you would ever think for its weight. I mean, a modern GS, the non-adventure version, is pushing 550 pounds. That puts it on the heavier end of the adventure spectrum. But when you ride it, you really don't feel that weight. However, the downside is you do feel that weight when you're going super slow, maneuvering it off-road, picking it up, or things like that. So when the trail gets really tight and technical, bumpy, rocky, sandy, whatever, you really start to feel that 550 pounds. And that's when the advantage of having a lighter weight bike like the 790 really comes into play. So in terms of off-road ability, I would rank between the three bikes, I would rank the 790 number 1 off-road, the Africa Twin number 2, and the GS number 3. But it's a bit more nuanced than that. But if I have to rank them, that's the ranking I'm going to give. It's not that the GS is not capable, it's just it doesn't feel as comfortable and at home off-road, if that makes sense for you. Okay, so why did I switch from then the GS then going to the 790? So first of all, like I mentioned, I really did want to keep both, but financially it just made sense to sell the GS to pay for this. So in the 790, what I was looking for was the increased versatility, the less weight, and the less cost. So here's what I mean. There's definitely a difference when you're riding off-road with a $20,000 550-pound GS versus a $13,000 470-pound KTM 790. It's a difference in how comfortable you are tackling the terrain, how much easier it is to ride in technical things like sand, mud, rocks. And it just comes down to the GS doesn't really feel, at least for me, as much at home on the trail as this bike does. Now, is the GS a better touring bike? Yes, absolutely. It's a better touring bike than the 790, and it's a better touring bike than the Africa Twin. And really, it's one of the best touring bikes of any motorcycle, period. So what I like about the 790, what drove me to it, and what I still like about it, is it's incredibly versatile. This thing can tear up twisty roads. With sport bikes, it can go touring if you throw the windshield on it and use your seat pad or a better seat, put on luggage. It can rip up the trail incredibly well for an adventure bike. This is the most off-road capable adventure bike I've ever ridden. And it's not just the capability, it's how comfortable you feel doing it. Let me give you this metaphor. So you can take a Chevy Suburban off the factory floor and take it on the trail. But it's not really great for that. It's big, heavy, and you just have to be more careful with it. Now, on the other hand, you can take a Jeep Wrangler and take it on the trail. The Wrangler is not as good of a car for going on road trips as the Suburban is, but it's certainly better for crawling down the trail. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. The 790 has a very lively, very energetic, powerful engine. It's only rated at 95 horsepower, but because of the light weight of the bike, the power to weight ratio is really, really good. It has long suspension travel. So my GS was like 7.5 inches of suspension, and this is 9.5 inches of suspension. So a lot more suited to off-road, a lot more travel to soak things up. The lighter weight, I mentioned that. So this carries the same exact fuel as the 1200GS, 5.3 gallons, but this carries the weight lower because of the saddle tank. Also, the fuel economy I get on this is like, I've never gotten worse than like 55 miles a gallon. I usually get closer to 60. So I have a range of a legitimate 300 miles compared to my GS was around 200 miles, maybe 220 miles. So that's a big difference as well. This thing does have really good features for such an off-road capable bike. The fact that you can put cruise control on it from the factory, which I did. The fact you can get the quick shifter, which works really, really well, better than the one on the GS in my opinion. That was a great plus for me. So basically it kind of took the things that I liked about the Africa Twin. It felt more at home on the trail and was more well-rounded, but then you added the things that I was missing from the Africa Twin, also dropping the weight and increasing the fuel range. So it seems like a win-win, right? Well, the 790 is by far from perfect, and we'll have more videos about this in the future, but there's already issues cropping up. I mean, my bike only has 1,500 miles on it, and already I've got an oil leak from the countershaft sprocket seal. So apparently there's a bushing or seal that is defective. It's a common issue with the 790 Adventures, but still, I'm not really used to having to take my bike into a dealer for repair when it's like 3 months old. That doesn't seem quite right. KTM is a company that rushes stuff out to production and doesn't really get the details sorted out. The advantage of that is you get to ride a really high-tech bike really soon, but the disadvantage is you're going to have more problems than you would with the Japanese brand, or in my opinion, even more problems than you would with a BMW. A lot of riders on the 790 have experienced failure of the rear shock. Now, my shock is holding up fine, but it's something I'm definitely watching for. Some people have had moisture getting in the TFT. I haven't had that yet, but again, I live in a dry climate, so maybe that's just because I live in a dry area. If you watch Brett Tax, he has a great channel. I suggest you guys follow him. He had multiple issues, which he documented on social media, but he had things like the rear brake caliper completely came off the bike, some pretty serious things. I've kind of beat the wind buffeting to death, pun intended, on this bike, so it definitely has wind buffeting issues worse than just about any other bike I've ridden. So, you know, the moral of the story is here, I hope you're getting the picture, you can't have everything. There's always going to be some trade-off. Basically, what you should do when you're thinking of what bike to get, you should think to yourself, what compromises are more acceptable to you? Are you willing to get something maybe a little bit heavier and a little bit less powerful, but you want the most reliable bike you can get? Or maybe you're more of a touring rider. You want the absolute touring comfort. You want the shaft drive so you don't have to mess with the chain. You want the ultimate, bike to ride to Alaska. Well, then that's going to push you more towards a GS or maybe a Yamaha Super Tenere, and you're not as worried about the weight. If you're a really aggressive off-road rider, you're going to be pushing more towards something like the 790 or the 700. But again, everything has compromises. I talked about this in my comparison between the 700 and the 790. And the 700, yeah, it's cheaper. It's a tiny bit lighter, although not really when you look at the gas capacity. But with the 700, you give up the cruise control, you give up the quick shifter, you give up some of the nicer options that this has. Also, it doesn't have tubeless wheels. So again, you got to put everything on the scale and decide what works for you. A lot of people are biased against KTM because of KTM's reputation for having reliability issues, and I don't really blame them, although my experience has been the issues are not as bad as the internet would lead you to believe. So I'm going to have a moment of real honesty here and sort of reflection. So I bought the 790 because of the reasons I talked about, but also because I was able to get a very good deal on one. Now, if I was buying it again today, like right now today, it would be very hard for me to decide between the new Africa Twin, the 1100, the standard model, I wouldn't get the big Adventure Sport one, and this bike. The reason I say that is the Africa Twin has advanced since I had my last one. I like how it looks better than this bike. I like the quality better. I think it'll have less issues in the short run and the long run. The engine has less vibration, although the vibration on this is not bad at all. It's just the Africa Twin is smoother. And overall, I just feel the Honda is just a better quality machine. So if I have a lot of issues with the 790 the next couple years, we'll see how it goes. But that would be my runner-up, I think, would be the new Africa Twin. So anyway, long story short, everything's a compromise. Pick what compromise you want. Enjoy bikes while you can. Life is really short. Get out there and ride. Anyway, I hope this video was somewhat useful to all of you guys out there. I appreciate your support. Please subscribe if you haven't. Please give the video a thumbs up. Ride safe, and we'll see you out on the trail.